So Bahrain is now facing a stark choice between the rule of law or sliding into a downward spiral of repression and instability. And following on that, Amnesty International warned in a recent report, the name of the report is Bahrain Reform Shelved, Repression Unleashed. And indeed, just as you notice from Abdullah's talk, reforms are actually shelved. The report comes during the first anniversary, November 2012, of a landmark report by the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry, which is better known as BICI, which was established by the country's authorities to investigate abuses during the 2011 anti-government protests. BICI report found that the Bahraini government, responsible for gross human rights violations and documented widespread abuses. It made a series of recommendations, including calling on the authorities to bring to account those responsible for human rights abuses and to carry out independent investigations into allegations of torture and other violations. After BICI published its report in November 2011, the government committed itself to implementing the recommendations. But as this briefing makes clear, instead of fulfilling this undertaking, the authority swiftly moved to entrench repression, culminating in October 2012 in the banning of all rallies and gatherings in the country in violation of the right to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. And in November, with the stripping of Bahraini nationality from 31 opposition figures. The Bahraini government proved that it is not committed to any kinds of reforms or to implementing the recommendations of BICI. This deepens the human rights crisis in Bahrain. Any claim that the government is committed to reforms does not make sense if you follow the current reports about the escalating violations. The establishment of BICI, made up of international human rights and legal experts, was considered a groundbreaking initiative. But a year on, it has been effectively shelved. The US and UK governments applauded the establishment of BICI and welcomed its final report. Yet, in the face of the worsening human rights situation in the country, Bahrain's two allies have been more vocal in their criticism of the country's human rights record. However, officials have not matched these expressions of concern with any meaningful actions or consequences. Indeed, both governments continue to call for reconciliation and reform in Bahrain, clinging to the illusion of reform and minimizing blows to the stated reform process. There has not been any serious action. Arms sale to US arms sale and other Western arms sale to Bahrain and to Saudi Arabia continues until today. For victims and their families, justice and reparation remain elusive. I want to talk about the current conditions, but it's always good to refer to the past as well. I think what you have seen in the documentary illustrates human rights violations in Bahrain very clearly. The ICI determined that 35 people died between February and March 2011. Prominent political and human rights figures like Abdelhadi Khawaja and Mushayma, and others also, who we have seen in the documentary, they received life in a prison sentence. You have seen in the documentary as well the health professionals, they were also sentenced, and most of the detainees were tortured. More than 2,500 people were arrested. Now we are talking about a country with just over 1 million. The population is very small. Having more than 2,000 of the population arrested is a serious issue. Of whom at least 5 died in custody as a result of torture. At least 4,000 people who stayed away from their jobs during the arrest or were believed to have participated in the protests were sacked or suspended, including nearly 300 from the state-owned Bahrain Petroleum Company. Some government reports claim that they returned to their jobs. Dozens of students were dismissed from universities, and others studying abroad had their grants suspended. Some of the students, like Jassim al-Hulayli and others, they received unbelievable sentences reaching to 15 years in prison. However, I want to concentrate on what we can call now post-BICI Bahrain. An increasing number of children, just as Abdullah said, aged between 15 and 18 have been held in adult prisons and detention centers in the past few months. The total number could be 80, according to lawyers and local human rights activists. Many of these children were arrested during demonstrations and have been accused of what's known as illegal gathering or rioting. Some of them allegedly they were beaten. Some of them alleged they were beaten during arrest or onto the way to police stations. In some cases, they did not have access to their families or lawyers during the first hours of detention and were forced to sign confessions. In other cases, they were formally charged with criminal offenses under the penal code, tried in regular as opposed to juvenile justice system, and as international law states, you can try children in adult courts. Convicted and sentenced to prison terms. Human rights defenders and activists denouncing such abuses are repeatedly harassed, and some have been jailed for carrying out the rights to freedom of expression, association and assembly. One of the human rights defenders is the president of Bahrain Center of Human Rights, Nabil Rajab, who was sentenced to 3 years in a prison. Nabil Rajab was sent to prison just for tweeting. He was posting Twitter posts about human rights violations, and that's why he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Amnesty International has documented in the past few months many cases where peaceful protests have been suppressed by the security forces using shotguns and tear gas. 2 children have died after being shot during protests. Since the beginning of the protests in 2011 until the end of October 2012, at least 70 people have died as a result of the use of unnecessary or excessive force by the security forces. At least 24 people have died since the BICI report was issued. Hussam al-Haddad, 16-year-old, died on August 17, 2012 in Al-Muharraq, the day after he was shot by riot police. His family say he had gone to a nearby cafe while demonstrations were going on that same area. A family member who was present alleged that after Hussam al-Haddad was shot, and while he was on the ground, a riot police officer hit him with his rifle and kicked him. Hussam al-Haddad was taken to the military hospital and then to Al-Salmaniya hospital. I'll just mute myself. Just the echo. He was taken to the military hospital and then to the Salmaniya medical complex. His family was informed about his death at around 2 a.m. that night. And on October 9th, the Special Investigation Unit determined that the policeman who shot at him was acting in self-defense after being attacked, and the case was therefore closed. Also, we have seen a case of Ali Nama, 16-year-old too, who died on September 28 after he was hit by shotgun fire in Southern Village. And in an ominous move, the Bahraini authorities on November 7th stripped 31 opposition figures of their Bahraini nationality. A Ministry of Interior statement indicated that the group, including politicians, activists, and religious figures, have their nationality revoked because they had caused damage to state security. Now we are talking about very peaceful activists who most of their work is giving talks or writing or blogging. Bahrain risks sliding into protracted unrest and instability and is at crossroads now. BICI report provides a roadmap to put Bahrain on the path of the rule of law. Only the genuine implementation of the BICI report recommendation would hold the slide. Bahrain's close allies, including the USA and the UK, can no longer shield behind BICI and pretend it is business as usual.